The American left, a complex and ever-evolving entity, has undergone a dramatic transformation over the past century. From its roots in classical liberalism, it has drifted towards a more radical ideology, embracing identity politics and increasingly authoritarian tendencies. Understanding this evolution is crucial to grasping the current political landscape. Classical liberalism, with its emphasis on individual liberty, limited government, and free markets, provided the initial framework for the American left. Thinkers like John Locke and Thomas Jefferson championed these principles, shaping the nation's founding documents. This foundation emphasized individual rights and limited government intervention. However, the 20th century witnessed a significant shift. The progressive era, beginning in the late 19th century, marked a departure from this classical liberal tradition. Progressives advocated for a more active role for government in addressing social and economic issues, paving the way for the modern welfare state. This shift continued throughout the 20th century, with the New Deal, World War II, and the Civil Rights Movement, each leaving their mark on the American left. These events further expanded the role of government and led to the embrace of social liberalism. This new form of liberalism, while still grounded in individual rights, placed greater emphasis on social justice and equality of opportunity. The intellectual landscape of the 20th century played a pivotal role in shaping the American left. Two figures in particular, John Dewey and Sigmund Freud, exerted a profound influence on liberal thought, albeit in vastly different ways. Their ideas, though seemingly disparate, converged to reshape the left's understanding of the individual, society, and the role of government. John Dewey, a prominent philosopher and educational reformer, championed a pragmatic approach to knowledge and social change. He believed that experience, rather than abstract principles, should guide education and social policy. This emphasis on experimentation and social engineering resonated with progressives and laid the groundwork for the expansion of government programs. On the other hand, Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, delved into the depths of the human psyche, unearthing the power of unconscious drives and motivations. His theories, particularly his emphasis on sexuality and childhood experiences, profoundly impacted the left's understanding of human nature. Freud's ideas fueled the sexual revolution and the rise of identity politics. By emphasizing the fluidity of identity and the importance of personal experience, his work provided a framework for understanding individual grievances through the lens of group identity. The middle decades of the 20th century proved to be a crucible for the American left. The Great Depression shattered faith in laissez-faire capitalism, paving the way for Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. This sweeping set of government programs, aimed at alleviating economic suffering, fundamentally reshaped the relationship between citizens and the state. World War II further solidified the government's role in American life. The war effort demanded unprecedented mobilization and sacrifice, blurring the lines between public and private spheres. The war also exposed the horrors of fascism, strengthening the left's commitment to social justice and internationalism. These events, coupled with the ongoing struggle for racial equality, gave rise to social liberalism as the dominant ideology of the American left. Social liberals, while still committed to individual liberty, embraced a more expansive role for government in promoting social welfare and equality of opportunity. This new liberalism formed the bedrock for the Civil Rights Movement and the Great Society programs of the 1960s. The late 1960s witnessed a dramatic radicalization within the American left. The Student New Left, disillusioned with traditional liberalism and fueled by the Vietnam War, challenged the status quo, demanding sweeping social and political change. This new generation of activists questioned traditional power structures, embraced radical ideologies, and laid the groundwork for identity politics. Simultaneously, the feminist movement gained momentum, challenging patriarchal norms and demanding equal rights for women. While rooted in the pursuit of equality, the movement's trajectory soon intersected with the burgeoning field of identity politics. This convergence shifted the focus from universal rights to the specific grievances of women as a distinct group. This embrace of identity politics marked a significant departure from the universalist principles of classical liberalism. By prioritizing group identity over individual rights, the left began to fragment into a coalition of interest groups, each vying for recognition and resources based on their perceived oppression. This shift laid the groundwork for the increasingly divisive and polarized political landscape we see today. Section 5. The Unraveling, the Sexual Revolution and the Fragmentation of Social Norms. The sexual revolution, while often celebrated as a period of liberation, played a complex and multifaceted role in the evolution of the American left. On the one hand, it challenged traditional moral codes and empowered individuals to embrace their sexuality more freely. On the other hand, it contributed to the unraveling of social norms and the fragmentation of society along ideological lines. The left largely embraced the sexual revolution, viewing it as a triumph over repressive social conventions. However, this embrace was not without its complexities. The movement's emphasis on personal liberation, coupled with the rise of identity politics, led to a proliferation of sexual identities and a growing emphasis on sexual rights as a political battleground. This focus on sexuality as a defining characteristic of identity further fragmented the left. Debates over issues like pornography, abortion, and LGBTQ+ rights created deep divisions within the movement, often overshadowing broader concerns about economic inequality and social justice. This fragmentation made it increasingly difficult for the left to present a unified front on key issues. Section 6. The Long March, Radicalization, and the Neoliberal Consensus. As the 20th century drew to a close, the radicalization of the American left continued apace. The New Left, initially a fringe movement, exerted a growing influence on academia, media, and cultural institutions. This long march through the institutions, as it came to be known, gradually shifted the Overton window, making once radical ideas increasingly mainstream. This shift coincided with the rise of neoliberalism, an economic and political ideology that emphasizes free markets, globalization, and individual responsibility. While seemingly at odds with the left's traditional emphasis on social justice, neoliberalism found common ground with the left on issues like identity politics and cultural liberalism. This unlikely alliance created a new power structure, often referred to as the neoliberal consensus. This consensus united the economic elite, who benefited from free trade and deregulation, with cultural progressives, who embraced the language of diversity and inclusion. This alliance, while seemingly disparate, effectively silenced dissenting voices and marginalized those who challenged the status quo. Section 7. The Specter of Despotism, Identity Politics and the Weaponization of Justice. The embrace of identity politics has had profound and troubling consequences for the American left. While intended to address historical injustices and promote equality, it has in many ways exacerbated social divisions and created a climate of intolerance and censorship. This trend raises serious concerns about the potential for despotism within leftist movements. Identity politics, by its very nature, divides society into competing groups based on race, gender, sexual orientation, and other immutable characteristics. This emphasis on group identity over individual rights creates a hierarchy of oppression, where those deemed most marginalized hold the most moral authority. This dynamic has led to the weaponization of justice, where accusations of racism, sexism, and other forms of bigotry are used to silence dissent and punish those who deviate from the prevailing orthodoxy. This climate of fear and intimidation stifles open debate and undermines the very principles of free speech and intellectual inquiry upon which a healthy society depends. Section 8. Silencing Dissent. Censorship in the Age of Identity Politics. The rise of identity politics has coincided with a disturbing trend toward censorship and the suppression of dissenting viewpoints. The left, once a champion of free speech and open debate, has become increasingly intolerant of ideas that challenge its worldview. This shift has serious implications for the future of American democracy. Censorship can take many forms, from deplatforming and shadow banning on social media to pressure campaigns aimed at silencing dissenting voices in academia, journalism, and the arts. This suppression of ideas, often justified in the name of protecting marginalized groups, creates an echo chamber where only approved narratives are allowed to circulate. This intolerance of dissenting viewpoints is antithetical to the principles of a free society. It creates a climate of fear and self-censorship, where individuals are afraid to express their true beliefs for fear of social ostracism or professional repercussions. This stifling of free speech ultimately undermines the marketplace of ideas and hinders our ability to engage in meaningful dialogue about complex and challenging issues. Section 9. Conclusion, at the precipice. A warning and a call to action. The American left stands at a crossroads. Its journey from classical liberalism to its current incarnation, marked by identity politics, radical ideologies, and a penchant for censorship, raises profound questions about its future and its commitment to the principles of individual liberty and limited government. The seductive allure of identity politics, with its promise of social justice and equality, has blinded many to its inherent dangers. By dividing society into competing tribes and silencing dissent, identity politics undermines the very foundations of a free and open society. This path leads not to liberation but to tyranny. It is not too late for the left to rediscover its commitment to individual rights, free speech, and open debate. This requires a rejection of identity politics and its divisive ideology. It demands a return to the universalist principles of classical liberalism, where individual liberty, not group identity, is paramount. The future of American democracy hangs in the balance. The choice before the left is clear: continue down the path of identity politics and censorship, or reclaim its heritage of liberty and justice for all.
The American Left. From Liberalism to Despotism. Copyright 2025 Sean Armstrong, Super Gringo Books. All rights reserved. ISBN 978,312,449,105. Introduction. The evolution of the American left represents a complex tapestry woven with ideals of liberty, equality, and justice. Emerging from the Enlightenment principles of the 18th century, liberalism has historically served as the backbone of progressive movements in America. However, as societal dynamics shifted and political landscapes evolved, elements within the American left began to veer towards authoritarian tendencies. The origins of the American left can be traced back to early reform movements that sought to address issues like slavery, women's suffrage, and workers' rights. These movements were largely characterized by a commitment to democratic principles and civil liberties. The progressive era at the turn of the 20th century marked a significant shift where reformist zeal was directed toward curbing corporate power and expanding social welfare, a reflection of classical liberal ideals adapted for contemporary challenges. However, this period also introduced tensions within leftist ideology, as factions emerged advocating for more radical changes. The rise of socialism during the Great Depression illustrated a departure from mainstream liberalism towards an agenda that questioned capitalism itself. Figures like Eugene V. Debs championed workers' rights while calling for systemic change, laying groundwork for future ideological rifts. As World War II concluded, and civil rights emerged as a prominent issue in America, a new generation of leftists adopted broader definitions of justice that encompassed racial equality and anti-imperialism. The civil rights movement galvanized numerous activists who sought not only legal reforms but also profound cultural shifts, an endeavor steeped in both moral conviction and political pragmatism. Yet as these movements gained momentum, they also faced backlash from conservative factions who perceived them as threats to traditional values and institutions. This opposition fostered an environment where some leftists embraced increasingly radical tactics, culminating in confrontational protests during events such as the Vietnam War. The late 20th century saw further fragmentation within leftist ideologies, with the emergence of identity politics, a shift that prioritized individual narratives based on race, gender, sexuality, and class over more generalized notions of class struggle or economic equity. While this approach succeeded in amplifying marginalized voices, it also led to accusations regarding divisiveness and intolerance toward dissenting views. In recent years, particularly following events such as Donald Trump's presidency and subsequent social unrest over issues like police brutality and systemic racism, there has been a noticeable rise in authoritarian rhetoric among certain factions within the American left. Calls for censorship on campuses under cancel culture banners have raised alarms about free speech limitations. Similarly, demands for punitive measures against those deemed transgressors have sparked debates about collective punishment versus individual accountability. The journey from classical liberalism towards what some may label despotism reflects an ongoing tension between ideals rooted in freedom versus practices that can lead to authoritarian outcomes when misapplied or taken too far. While many adherents remain committed to fostering democratic engagement and ensuring equality for all citizens through peaceful means, others risk straying into territory where dissent is stifled under dogmatic adherence to specific ideological frameworks. As we navigate these complexities today, it is imperative for proponents on both sides of the political spectrum to engage thoughtfully with one another, rather than retreat into echo chambers that threaten fundamental democratic tenets. Only through genuine dialogue can we hope to reconcile past grievances while safeguarding our shared commitment to liberty, a legacy worthy of preservation amidst evolving realities confronting contemporary society. To appreciate the current trajectory of the American left, one must first understand its roots in liberalism.